Oh, welcome to another edition of... No, that's not the right opening. Anyway, welcome to another draft physics presentation. Yeah, that's probably better. Anyway, so comments mostly, and not sure where we're going to go. Might be some interferometer stuff, so I will do some drawing if we get to that part, but there's a lot of little snarkyisms to take care of. So mostly just answering the rude critiques of the rude critiquers. So anyway, this Battlestar Commander guy, I'll do this one first. On this page, they talk about photon-photon interaction. So it's the Swinger limit. This is Feynman's. It gets into Feynman's. Feynman had a whole bunch of ideas, and frankly, they're all theoretical things that kind of are unprovable. Like the whole idea that every electron in the universe is the same electron, just jumping time dimensions and stuff. Just kind of stuff that's kind of way out there. Anyway, so the Swinger limit is just, it's sort of like a theoretical thing, but you can't really prove it because the consequence of the interaction is essentially the same as what the universe would look like without the interaction. So if the two things miss each other, I've sort of made this argument before with kinetic interactions or purely inelastic interactions, however you want to describe it. The two events can look identical. The things banging off of each other or the things going past each other, the two universes would look identical. And so it's just theoretical crap. It has nothing to do with any observed photon hitting photon event. I'm saying there's no evidence that it happens, and I'm saying there's no reason to think it happens. Because it seems clear that forces don't interact with forces, and frankly, photons are a force. They're force bits. They're not matter bits. Anyway. I mean, I've sort of been over this, but whatever. So this Battlestar Commander guy, I'll give him his last shot here. I mean, just incomprehensible crud. Then blows so-called dynamo theory, you scoundrel. Then blows so-called. I don't know how I'm supposed to make sense out of that. And this guy responds to him, Battlestar Commander R3D3. I don't know what any of this is. Don't want to know. People are just living in some other world altogether. So then blows the Earth dynamo theory that you scoundrels push on us. I don't even know what that means. I'm not pushing. I'm pushing a theory that force controls everything. There's no Earth dynamo. So much with that fixed side of the moon. I don't know. I wouldn't trust one of you types for nothing. Well, I obviously feel the same way about you. I think goldfish maintenance is above your qualifications. I'll give the unsubscribing to your channel a bit. Maybe you should read some Dr. Seuss. I don't know. I mean, literacy is a tricky thing. I'm not incredibly literate. I mean, this is written so poorly, and I don't even know, even if it was written well, I don't think you're saying anything rational. I think you really are quite crazy. In case you want to reply to this, at least I would have allowed you the freedom of speech. So you still don't even know what freedom of speech is. Freedom of speech doesn't mean heckling. Heckling, do you think heckling is freedom of speech? Oh, you get to talk over me? Is that it? You don't get the equal right to make videos or the equal right to make comments. No, you get to have special rights. So you're saying I should actually have the right and heckle people on their videos. I mean, I can just type shit about how you look like you have a small penis, and I can just type that on every video and it's going to work. I can type it on every single video that I don't like. I could just make the accusation, you look like you have a small penis, and therefore are desperate, and that's why you're talking like a girl. So, fuck you. You don't understand what it is to be civil and fair. To make, if you want to make a fair criticism, make a fair criticism. But this isn't fair or rational or reasonable or productive. It's useless noise. You're just a farter, not a talker. All right. Brendan Phelps. Hey, bro. Fuck you, dude. This is not beside you. I like your videos. Didn't Tesla invent? Oh, so there's a point. Didn't Tesla invent? The point would be by comparison to whom? Okay, Tesla's name is now known by everybody because he's some sort of feel bad for him underdog, even though he had huge advantages that like the Wright brothers didn't have. You know, they didn't have J.P. Morgan giving him $1 million to do things. So yes, Tesla invented in the sense that Tesla made modifications to existing systems that were very productive. Okay, like Edison's generators, for example. Edison was a telegraph guy, and you know, he knew solenoids and stuff. They had gotten that far, so he kind of knew the idea that you could move shit around coils and create reactions. So his original motors were really crude in the sense they were just on-off motors. You know, they just had two flip sides to them. They were totally inefficient, okay, as motors. And Tesla improved it a little, not a lot, but a little. And the further innovation of Tesla's was the idea of moving the field through phase. So his phase invention was a really, that's like electric fans, you know, ceiling fans, you know, motors that don't have as many moving parts, so to speak. They don't have an armature because they have a permanent magnet, and you know, it makes for a very efficient motor, but not one with much torque. Well, anyway, the point is yes, Tesla did invent, but I'm just saying by comparison to these other characters, you know, around him, like Edison. I mean, come on. He's not in their class. And look what he did. I mean, like the telegraph thing. Okay, now Rutherford probably, you know, should be given some credit because he's the guy who first discovered that when you do this whole electricity magnet thing, you create this mysterious noise in the environment, and the noise can be detected at a distance. And that's really the wireless telegraph. That's the nature of it, is this idea that somehow there's some noise going through the atmosphere and you can pick it up with a coil of wire. And Tesla was given money to do that. You know, and Tesla knew about it because Tesla worked with high voltages at high frequencies, and they created a lot of noise, this radio noise. And so this was his thing. And instead of doing the thing that really they wanted, which is we don't want to have to run telegraph wires across the ocean. It was really a difficult thing to do, is run, you know, a wire across the ocean back then. This wireless thing would be fantastic. And so Tesla had one mission. It was kind of an important one. Everybody could kind of see this would be a great thing to invent. And what did he do with the money? Instead of trying to just communicate, say hello to France, he sat there because he had a notion in his head that there's free energy flying around in the atmosphere, that he could send them a nuclear power plant worth of energy, you know, and he could pull it out of the ground and the atmosphere. Now that was his theoretical notion. That was it's a completely wrong theoretical notion. So his theory was completely wrong, and he wasted all the money trying to send megawatts to France instead of just saying hello. So he couldn't even get his missions right because he was so obsessed with his own agenda, his ether theory, by the way. So look, I'm not saying you can't say, oh, you know, Tesla's an okay guy, blah blah blah. I like Tesla as a person. He seemed kind of a likable, neurotic, kind of eccentric human, which, you know, is a character trait I like. He took care of pigeons in his old age. I like that. But he didn't do any perspirating, you know, where Edison, you know, it's all about the, you know, invention is 99% perspiration and 1% innovation or imagination. It takes hard work, and Tesla wasn't really much of a worker. But whatever. Go ahead. Believe in whatever God you want to. I don't want to argue Tesla forever. My biggest objection to Tesla is his theory is wrong. It's just show stuff. See, that's another example. Tesla would go to Europe and put on electric shows, and they were just shows to fool the ignorant. You know, they were magic shows. It wasn't really. He wasn't doing science. He wasn't explaining what was happening. All right. So electric motors. He didn't invent electric motors. Okay. He advanced the engineering of electric motors, but it was in no way the foundation of our entire industry. That's not what he did. Alright, question mark. I don't know what that's supposed to mean either. You know, idiotic comments. Alright, so this guy's some anime character. Okay, so just let you know the icon's anime. What do you think? You know, you in capital. And I know you don't like quantum stuff, but this is mind-blowing. Roundy face exy thing. I don't know what that means. Kissy kissy or something. I don't know. Look, I sometimes get. I like quantum stuff in the sense that I like the idea that yes, physics is about quantizing, about figuring out what the components are, and the idea that it's a truth in physics that stuff is kind of dependable. The photon is a photon, electron is an electron. That kind of stuff is good. But that's not really where quantum's heading. Quantum's heading in completely the opposite direction. The word quantum should be taken out of quantum mechanics because they really don't care about quantizing anything anymore, because they're making everything amorphous and floaty and uncertain and probabilistically random, all kinds of silly shit. So I don't like it for that reason. Now this is on the subject of the stupid qubit and quantum computing, and he thinks it's going to create all these animatrons that'll be so human and have little anime characters to have sex with, and that's what he's interested in. This whole supercomputer thing is just such a farce, because you can make computers more and more powerful just by making the computers, tying them together. You know, like when they did a dual core and then quad core, and then so there's different ways where you can maximize computing power. And the idea of making the memory storage is the really important stuff. Making it smaller and smaller has huge advantages. Now, do we need to have do we need to make it this small? The smartwatch. Yeah, $7. It's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, you can scroll, you can click on things. It's really quite brilliant. Anyway, do I need to make it smaller to make it more productive? Not necessarily. There's applications where small is important, but frankly, we don't need nano computing to do supercomputing. The two things aren't the same thing. So, frankly, you could essentially Wi-Fi an Android to a mainframe and probably get just as productive results. Obviously there's speed advantages, so you get smaller and smaller, you get less distance to travel, blah blah blah, lots of things get, there's advantages. But this whole idea of this qubit is such nonsense, because it really, the premise of it, if you could ever find it explained, which you can't really, the premise of it is that somehow you can do ambiguous logic or erroneous logic. That somehow you can have fuzzy answers and get the right answer with fuzzy input. You can put garbage in and get good out. That is a premise that's idiotic. And then the other premise is that you're essentially jumping, you're tunneling to the correct answer. So instead of having to add 2 plus 2 to get 4, you can somehow just see the 2 and say, I'm going to tunnel to the answer 4. Jump to the future and get it. So it's premised on stuff that just isn't going to happen, in my opinion. No chance. So, but whatever. That's what I have to say about it. Whatever. I don't think it's physics. It's some other subject. Alright. How do you have more thumbs down than likes? Clearly, Bright Insight is some sort of weird cult and has fake bots. Anytime I try to talk to commenters, I never get a reply. Like they're all just bots. Well, they're probably not bots, they're probably him, but whatever. It's really not the subject, but fine. I mean, again, this is the argument about somebody just talks a bunch of fake history about Tesla, and I make a response video, and I've offended the gods. I've offended their Christianity. You know, I've drawn an ugly picture of Mohammed, and all the trolls have to come out and fight for Tesla's honor. Anyway, hey, did you see that new video by John Wayne fella? He's something else. So this is by a Wilfred Gillian, who, you know, W.J. John Wayne backwards. So he's obviously John Wayne's own sock account, provoking me to go to this link by John Wayne. And I really wouldn't look, you know, if somebody wants to make videos, I'm all for it. You make a response video, but he doesn't make anything called a respectful, coherent, reasonable response. And I don't think I have any obligation to play along with a troll. And so if he can't do his counter arguing in some form that isn't just overt trolling, why should I play with that? So anyway, we're going to do this video. I thought it was there. Oh dear, hope I didn't lose it. Oh yeah, this is it. I just haven't, it's not scrolled up to it. So let's see if that's on the screen. It's close enough, I think. That'll do, pig. So he's still doing this obscuring himself thing, and then he's playing music in the background of the video because he thinks that's stylish, I guess. I mean, it's just, you know, why? I don't get it. You do that when you're trying to make some emotional point. Physics isn't about emotions. You know, I'm just saying, it really shouldn't be. So if you're not trying to make an emotional point as part of your persuasion, then what do you need music in the background for? To do a conversation on what the actual effect is in a interferometer. So he premises the argument with this little speech about the fact that you must accept inertial frames. And I do accept the fact that, like if a school of fish, for example, is moving through the water together as a school, that they have they are in an inertial frame. Now, not all the fish at any one moment are going the same direction. They could be swirling as they're moving, but they all have that momentum, so to speak, as a collective. They share something in common, and that is, over a period of time, they will make a certain progress in a direction, and they might not make it in exactly the same way. Some might swim 30 miles an hour straight, and some might swim 60 miles an hour in a crooked line, but they end up in the same place. And that those kind of frames exist. So this cup, all the atoms have to move when I move this cup. They're all pulled by the forces holding the atoms together and pushed in this direction. So they share that in common, that movement. So yes, I accept the existence of that fact. Now, that you think that fact means there's a huge, now they're all collectively warped time, and therefore they have a different time reference in the universe. And I don't think there's any evidence that that exists, that they in any way warped time. Because you think, and I think, we agree that there's a relationship between velocity of matter and the fact that atomic decay is retarded, slowed down. Now that's a fact we could agree on. You think that fact means that Einstein's version of it, which is, well, that means it warped the time dimension, and it got bent. You bent time. Where I just say, no, the metabolism of the atom changes because it can't dance and go left, okay, at the same time. It has to, if it wants to go left and dance, it has to dance slower. Simple explanation. Now, you haven't counter-argued the simple explanation. You just said, my God is God, you will believe it or I will insult you. You must believe that there is a time dimension and it is warped. Even though there's no evidence that there's a time dimension and it's warped. There's only evidence that there's a relationship between velocity and a change in the function of some atomic structures.
Because we're using the technical definition of inertial reference frame. So we're in this inertial reference frame, right? And we have light, and it's, again, this is a mirror. And it's shooting like this, all right? So this is where it's coming from. It bounces this, half of it bounces this way, the other half bounces that way.
All right, so again, as I demonstrated already, you don't need a mirror. So all you need is a piece of glass with two sides. I think they have to come that way with two sides. Two surfaces. And it will split the light at a 45-degree angle. It will split the light 50-50. So you don't need anything complicated to split light. So that's the first observation I made. I demonstrated it through an experiment where I demonstrated that's exactly the truth. So what's the beam splitter's function? Why do you need to do something different to the beam splitter than just have a piece of glass and let it split the beam? How is this beam split by a plain piece of glass different than the beam split by a beam splitter? Well, that's what needs explaining.
And there's a dispute about what causes the fringe lines over here.
No, there's no dispute in the sense that I have I'm seeking an explanation, and all of you don't care. That's the dispute. The dispute is you just couldn't give a shit how the thing actually works, and you're just saying wave interference, even though wave interference by quantum mechanics rules is supposed to be a single photon breaks into two wave packets of probability, and the two wave packets interfere with each other, and then the single photon is collapsed into a location. That's quantum mechanics. You're implying that that's not what happens, that individual different photons travel different paths, and somehow the individual different photons interact with each other, okay, to create a result that frankly you don't have a theory for. So if you want to explain to me, show me how these waves do that, how first the photon is broken into these probability waves, and where these probability waves interact. You don't have any explanation. You don't give me any of those details. You just tell me it's part of our dogma that this is wave interference, and we don't care how it happens. We don't care about having to explain it. We just tell you what the truth is. We don't have to explain why it's the truth. And that's all you're doing here.
Some people say that it's the two beams combining that creates this fringe pattern. Other people beg to differ and say that the fringe pattern is the result of diffraction of the mirror.
Well, what they're saying is, and what I'm saying, is that clearly what is happening inside of these things you're using as a beam splitter is there's internal reflections. And the internal reflections are creating the pattern. So the light is bouncing between the two surfaces, because especially at a 45-degree angle, 50% of the light is going to reflect through each transition. So at every transition there's a 50-50 chance it bounces back. And so that's why you can get quite a lot of reflections and still have a pattern. And clearly the light that comes in more straight, let's see, more straight, the straighter the light comes in, obviously the lower the amount of reflection. So the light coming in straight, only 4% comes back, and at 45 degrees much more of it comes back. But the key is it's the light as it goes in to the one surface. So there's two surfaces here. As it passes through the one surface, it diffracts, so its angle changes, and that can create more internal reflections because the likelihood of reflection is increased because it's inside the material.
But there's one thing that we can all agree on, hopefully. It's that this fringe pattern changes as a result of changing one of the lengths. So if we change this leg and we make it slightly longer by nanometers, then the resulting fringe pattern shifts.
Right. So to be clear, though, you don't need the other arm at all. So what I also demonstrated on my porch by doing the experiment with different materials, a splitter that had a diffraction gradient in it and one that doesn't, what I demonstrated is that you get the exact pattern. It does the cycling, that is, you can make it cycle where it looks like it's going into the center, and then by turning it the other way you can make it look like it's coming out of the center. So it does everything the traditional interferometer pattern does, and you don't need the second arm at all. So I'm just saying you can create the interference pattern without the second leg being involved in the experiment at all. So I'm going to argue to you, what do you think is creating that interference pattern when there's no second leg, no other arm? There's no comparison arm to recombine. So you're not recombining some other distance. Now, I'm just saying that you have to accept as a fact, because I did the experiment, I showed the video. It's a fact. You can use a plain piece of glass, and well, the trick is the dust. Creates another layer, the dirt. And that layer, okay, is the one diffracting the light, which means that the light's leaving at all kinds of angles. So maybe I'll draw this. I already went over it a little bit, but I'll go over it a little bit more, just to be thorough, or just to make the point so it's clear what I'm saying. Alright, so what was found is that you have your piece of glass, and the thing that you need to create the really good pattern, that is the rings and the rings that cycle. So you should know what I mean by cycling, okay? The pattern cycles from light to dark, light to dark. To get that pattern, there has to be something to diffract the light. And the key with the glass was that it's dirt, or some particles, moisture, oil from your fingers, whatever. Any layer of dirt will do. And what the happening is, so if I blow that up, you know, big, you can understand that the little dirt particle, what's happening is when the light is interacting, this is like a single surface experiment or anything else, this is creating different possible paths. So depending on how close the light goes to the particle, it will do like the single slit pattern or the double slit pattern. It has a possibility of this will be like, it'll do this 8 times out of 10, it'll do this, you know, 6 times, it'll do this 2 times, 1 time kind of thing, whatever the numbers would be. Well, obviously out of 10 it couldn't be that. It'd be at these different angles. And depending on how close it is, those numbers change. This 8 would go away if you're really close to the surface. But the point is that these angles are going to get much sharper. So it's coming in already at a 45-degree angle, and the diffraction means that the internal reflection will be like a 90-degree angle, which means this reflection will be completely internal, almost completely. It could go 30 or 40 or 50. So it's the high probability. So it's this, like, instead of just being a 45-degree angle, which creates a 50-50, it ends up being say a 75-degree angle, which ends up being more like an 80-30 in terms of chance of the light reflecting each time it bounces. So staying inside the glass. So there's an 80% chance each time it stays inside the glass, but that 30% chance means it could leave here, or it could leave here. It could leave at any one of these bounces, and those are the rings. So the internal reflections are defining these rings. So, you know, 1 internal reflection is here, 2 internal reflections, 3 internal reflections, 4 internal reflections, 5 internal reflections. So the number of internal reflections is being dictated, is creating the pattern, and the pattern's being created because the diffraction off the dirt is causing these angles to become even sharper, which is increasing the likelihood of internal reflection. Alright, I think I explained that fairly well. I might as well, just for the sake of showing this, so I did the experiment with just a piece of glass, and it was dirty. And all I had to do was shine the light through, off here, off a mirror, back, and on this wall you would get the pattern. And off this wall you'd get the pattern. But you didn't need to have this mirror at all in the experiment. And the patterns were really good. I mean, they're in the videos. They are the classic interferometer pattern. They're not missing any substance. Alright, I think that's probably enough. I think I might go up. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay. So back, I did speed his video up a little, so, and I hope the audio is high enough. It's as high as I can make it. So.
And I can, I'll link a video in the description showing this.
So he didn't link the video showing anything, but again, you can't unshow what I have demonstrated. And what I have demonstrated is I don't need the two arms to create what they call the interference pattern. So I'm just saying maybe the two are affecting each other. Okay, maybe the two are hitting the same mirror and they're energizing it and causing, you know, the mirror to vibrate, and those vibrations are changing the diffraction pattern. There certainly could be explanations, mechanical explanations, for how the photons could affect each other when they're going through the same material, and that it could matter. Having the other arm will make it even more sensitive. Now that might be theoretically possible. I'm just saying the fundamental theory behind the thing, as stated, is undermined by the fact that the effect can be created without the appearance of interference exists without what is classically defined as the cause of the interference. So you don't want to take any account for that fact, is that they think the other arm is needed to create the interference pattern when it isn't.
The exact thing. Yeah. So I guess the dispute doesn't really, it's kind of immaterial, because we could argue about what causes the fringe pattern, but the point is,
you know, see, just saying, but that's not the point. The causes aren't important. Getting those right isn't important, and I think it's really important. Yeah.
The fringe pattern is a function of the difference in the lengths.
So again, the difference in the length. So he just said it. The fringe pattern is the function of the difference in the lengths. As I proved, you can get the fringe pattern, completely rich, cycling fringe pattern, and there's no difference in lengths. There's only one path. So there's no comparison, there's no combining two paths, no second mirror in the experiment. There's no two paths mixing to create the pattern. So you're just wrong to say we know this is what's happening, when no, I know the fringe pattern can be created without any of that, and I know it hands-on.
And if you were a logician, you would be able to infer that a change in the no change in the fringe shift implies that there's no change in the amount of time it took the light to travel.
So again, his obsession, because he believes in this time dimension, is that this is something about how long it takes photons to get somewhere, how much distance they travel, and I'm going to argue, well, I'll explain what I might as well make the argument now about how his interpretation is completely different than my interpretation of what we know the mechanics of it are. So forgive the reusing the same piece of paper, but I'm just kind of compulsive that way. Yeah, hate to waste. I also hate that this camera keeps dropping for no good reason. was not given permission to drop. Alright, so as I've pointed out, as light travels, it diverges slightly. And that becomes really important in terms of this divergence essentially is a measure of distance. So it's completely proportional. There's a completely proportional relationship between the divergence and the distance. D and D. Yeah, we'll say L, length and divergence. And that's essentially what's being measured, because the more it spreads, the change in the angle when it hits the glass, these angles are affected as it spreads. And so that's essentially what you're picking up in your pattern change, is the fact that where the light will hit on the mirror is changed by any tilt or movement in this piece of glass. If you move the glass back, this will hit a different spot. If you move it forward, it hits a different spot. So it's where on the glass gets hit is going to decide where these rings are going to be in space, so to speak, in terms of where they're going to reflect to. Will be a different ring. If it's this way, if I move the mirror, that ring will be here. So clearly that's what I'm claiming is the cause of the relationship between moving this mirror, and I find tilting it is even more dramatic in terms of creating the cycling. If I tilt it to the left, it cycles in. I tilt it to the right, it cycles out. Even more so than moving it distance-wise, any tilt in the mirror was, you get an incredible amount of change in the pattern. So it was much more sensitive to out of aligning of its vertical horizontal axis. It's much more sensitive to that. This type of experiment was much more sensitive to these kinds of movements rather than forward or back movements. So that's my explanation of the mechanical process that's creating the fringe. Now he says this is something to do with two beams coming in, so this one reflected and it's coming, and this one comes in this way, and it somehow these two beams are recombined here to come out and make this pattern. But he doesn't explain any theoretical explanation for that. And this distance problem, okay, it's where he gets to his frame argument, that he says, well, this whole frame is moving on planet Earth and blah 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 and has a velocity. Well, as I have already argued this, but whatever that is, it's not going to change the photon. The photon leaves and it goes the speed of light, nothing else. And all you're changing is, yes, you can, by moving forward where you're dumping stuff ahead of a car, if you're sitting on the hood and you're dropping things on the road, you can understand that the faster you go, just try to think, that's going to redshift and it shouldn't. And the things move 1,000 miles an hour, so you're dropping things that move forward. So that's where it breaks down. The car analogy works better dumping out of the trunk. You can see that if the car is going 100 miles an hour and you're dropping paint out of the back of the car, you could understand that the faster you go, the further apart the paint drops get. And the same photons are functioning the same way. So if you're shooting them out of the front here and your lens is moving, it means you will shift them a little bit, tighten them up. But you're not going to change their speed. And this surface is going to move towards them, okay, with a certain speed. So it's going to show up early, so to speak. The light's going to get to it before it would have. But in the whole trip is still going to be the same thing, because you're still reflecting off the surface, and this surface is still moving the surface that emitted, and it's going to show up also too early. So whatever you gained in the shortness of distance this way, you gain the same amount coming back. So the two would just cancel each other out, and you end up with no difference as a practical matter. It's not going to, and it's certainly, see, he thinks it's all dependent on two different phases of light. You know, the one path has a frequency and the other path has a frequency. And his claim is basically that the two frequencies are changed by their path length and that they're now out of phase. And as I've pointed out, first off, you haven't even demonstrated that you can create a laser beam that creates all the light in phase in the first place. You know, and then to split it and then recombine two beams that are at a different phase requires you to combine different photons. So unlike quantum mechanics that dictates that it's single photons that create all the quantum mechanical effects, that it's their wave functions that interact, not the actual photons, you don't have any evidence that different photons, two different photons, take two different paths and somehow they combine. Light plus light equals dark. So you lose two photons. You're not losing just a wave function of one photon, you're losing two photons, which again, there's no evidence that there's any of this light plus light equals dark. There's evidence that where there's twice as much light in some places and no light in others. No light, 2x light. 2x light, no light. This is the interference pattern. The interference pattern isn't photon here and this photon got annihilated. Photon here, annihilated. There's no annihilation events. So again, there's huge holes in their theory, and he's just saying, well, I'm just going to ignore all these arguments you're making. I won't address any of them as being explanations and being demonstrating paradoxes and complete misrepresentations of the truth. And that's what they are, complete misrepresentations of the actual facts. He claims things to be true that he doesn't have evidence for. And you ask him for the evidence and all he says is, my God is God. Everybody else knows it. The Borg told me so. As he implies here, for those who flunked high school physics. So for those who didn't have their brain whitewashed by the Borg and and just decided to be illogical assholes because the teacher with a bow tie told them so.
Back and forth as the Earth rotates. Okay. So if you have the Earth and it's rotating, if there's no fringe shift, that must mean that the length, the time that it took the light to travel back and forth, divided by the time it took the light to travel this way, that didn't change, even though the Earth was rotating. And if that didn't,
it obviously changes, but it changes consistent in both directions. So there's no way to detect it because the fact is it happens in both directions. It will be received twice as fast as it was twice as slow emitted. So if I throw a punch at your ugly gob and you move back from the punch, you can understand that you'll consume the momentum of the punch. Well, the same thing's true with redshift. If I throw some redshifted stuff at you, but you're going to receive it by blue shifting it, moving into it, then the redshift is cancelled by the receiver's blue shifting. It's about emitters and receivers. And you have to understand that the emitter creates the redshift or the blue shift. The thing moving does. And the thing receiving can do the same. So you can fix like the train problem. I don't know if you can do it with sound, because sound's in a medium. So sound is nothing like light. So that doesn't work. But I think you can with sound, so it doesn't matter. If you move into a red shifted sound, a sound that's been lower in tone, and you move into it, you'll bring it back to being its regular speed of the waves. So they've been stretched, or that is, they've been emitted at a longer period by the moving emitter, and then if you're receiving them faster than natural, faster than static, then you'll compensate for the stretching and put them back to the normal speed, the normal frequency. I mean, that's a real argument. You don't want to deal with it? Fine, but don't pretend that you have, because you haven't.
Change. Well, then logically and inescapably, it must be that...
See, it's not logically and inescapably. This is all their incredibly weak evidence, very strong fanaticism. So they have a huge fanatic interest. You know, it's like the Tesla nuts. They love Tesla. They just can't do anything else but love Tesla. Well, these are like the Einstein nuts. They can't do anything else but say Einstein was brilliant and he knew everything and he figured it all out, when he didn't really do anything. He turned the inverse square law into an anime cartoon of itself, and then sold you on some idiotic idea that time is also somehow related when it's not.
Case that light carries momentum.
Now, where in any of everything I've argued, right? So he's implying that somehow I have said something in my videos implying that light doesn't have momentum, when I've repeated over and over and over again that forces are quanta 1. They're force 1. They're mass 1. They're the elemental mass. Of course they have momentum. I've argued laser beams blow holes through things. Photons have momentum. There's no denying photons don't have momentum. I've never said they don't have momentum. I've never implied they didn't have momentum, ever. I just don't know where this comes from, especially from people who think that a photon is some wave thing. They don't even think it's a thing. They think it's some whatever, some bullet wave thing. That's all you can say, right? And this is the same guy who will mock other people's use of terminology. You know, when I could just say wavy-tons, oh sure.
All right. And if you don't see that, you're a moron.
Well, again, so I don't see what? Your dogma, yes, you've stated your dogma. I've pointed out how, no, it can be seen a lot of other ways, perfectly logical. There's a lot of other logical ways to connect the evidence dots. And I don't think you've paid any attention to the evidence, actually. You're not paying any attention to the fact that I demonstrated the experiment with a plain piece of glass. That I demonstrated by having only one path, I could create a rich pattern of interference.
Because let's do a little thought. Let's do some math here. So let's suppose this is our initial velocity. Okay, and we want to find out, well, how long is it going to take? And we can fill in numbers later. This is approximately.
So it's not about how long is it going to take. It's about whether your receiver is recessing or processing towards you, whether the thing you're bouncing it off of is moving towards you or away from you, and then the thing you're receiving it with is moving towards it or away from it. That's all that matters. Time isn't going to tell you anything. I mean, total time will tell you the actual amount of distance the light traveled. But like I said, the distance isn't going to matter because your target is recessing and your receiver is moving towards it. So your target's moving away the very time your receiver is moving towards. So it's like you running from Texas to New Jersey, and if the thing that launched you, okay, is moving towards New Jersey, and then New Jersey is moving away from Texas, those two amounts are still going to be the same. The total distance is going to be the same, and it's not. You can't change that.
30 kilometers per second, approximately. But it doesn't really matter what we put in here. This is the velocity of the Earth, and we can use it to find an equation that relates the travel time to the velocity of the Earth. So
again, these kind of equations don't mean much in the sense that you're going to have to integrate. You're going to have to the distance is always changing through the whole period that the light's active. And so, but whatever, continue. I just don't see how you can just figure out that the total distance has to be the same, because whatever the reflector's doing, the receiver's going to be doing in exactly the opposite way. In a sense, it's going to be moving forward while your mirror's moving away, moving towards while your mirror's moving away. The two movements of the reflector and the receiver are the only things that matter. The emitters are irrelevant.
Well, we'll assume that initially the Earth is traveling this direction relative to this experiment this way. All right.
So
let's play that.
He puts this idiotic music on. He doesn't really do the math, and he just puts a bunch of text over the video. So, I mean, I'll jump ahead, but yeah, it's just no point in listening because it's
Distance divided by time, and multiply that by time, you get distance back.
Okay.
This is equal to, well, it has to...
No point. And then he puts some text over the video at the end to say snarky things. I'm not doing this, reading text in a video. It's just nonsense, especially huge, giant scrolling text. It was just a colossal waste of my time. I did notice he said something in there, I'm doing this because it annoys you, or something like that. And I don't know, whatever your purpose is. I'm just saying, if that's the way you have to veil your arguments, if you people are so bad at doing physics or doing logic that you have to construct these pitifully horrible arguments. I mean, you're talking about frames all the time. This is how you're framing your own arguments. You're framing them in shit and antics and, you know, high school bullshit. And you're claiming to be the smart people. I mean, it's just fucking insane. So we'll get to some of these comments. Might as well read some of the old naysayers and nitpickers. So this guy says, you can't smear shit over someone who's already covered in turds. So another brilliant argument. Gary is immune to logic. So again, they think this is a logical argument. So one that ignores the facts you've articulated, ignores the arguments you've made, that's doing it the logical way. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so by a long way. Alright, so then logical imperialist, so another guy who's pretending that he gives a shit about facts and logic and combining facts correctly. No clue whatsoever. I told the fucker years ago, whatever that is, CO, carbon monoxide, kills you clean and without suffering. So again, it's not really true. I mean, carbon monoxide is a poison, you know, frankly, to the body. And if you don't finish the job, it'll leave you quite fucked up. I mean, it could be quite unpleasant. I mean, vomiting, different things like that. So it's not necessarily a free ride, because your body does start to react to it. Even though it's replacing the oxygen without you noticing, the carbon monoxide isn't doing that for free. And the process takes long enough where you're likely to feel some of it unless you're really sleepy to start with. Alright, you simply go to sleep and then you suffocate in your sleep. Well, it's not that simple, and even Kevorkian wasn't his preference, it was his second choice. And I think, frankly, nitrogen I think would be better than carbon monoxide, because at least it's not a poison. Or helium, but none of those things are as perfect as people. It's not as benign. You do know you're going to faint. You do feel the sensations. It is so efficient that thousands of people die from it every year by accident. Yes. But they don't necessarily die unless they're already asleep, and it happens without them waking up. He wouldn't listen. So again, this has nothing to do with me listening. Again, this guy thinks because people can kill themselves easily, like, first, it's not that easy. You have to get carbon monoxide canisters. You have to make sure you do it right. But regardless, it's not their obligation. It's not people's obligation to kill themselves to defend the argument that you had no right to give birth to them. Okay, you didn't have any rational authority to be playing God and pretending you know what's best. You don't have a right to impose you did the first imposition by creating life. The people wishing not to be created aren't the ones who have to justify their position. Theirs is the fail-safe position. He somehow thinks it is better to go into the internet and tell everyone else how shitty their lives are. Well, again, I'm not saying your lives are shitty. I'm saying your ethics suck. You're brutes and you're evil, torturing assholes. If you think your life is clean enough and that you've gotten away with it, that you can justify all that you've killed to provide for your comfort in your life, if you think that, then I think you are a sick, psychotic butcher. Yes, you're a Hitler. Their lives are, and they need to commit murder. Again, so they don't have to commit murder and suicide. So he puts murder and suicide in the same category, which is just bullshit. By killing the whole of mankind. Now, no one has to be killed. Again, the argument is having kids. This isn't the subject, obviously, of this channel, but this is the context. So just understand, it's because I'm a anti-natalist, more specifically an ethicist, and I don't think that life has any merit, and it just creates more pain than any kind of gain. I'm not allowed to have that opinion, and if I express that opinion, he can attack me in any realm for that opinion. And he's being logical and ethical to mix these subjects. And all animal kingdoms. Yes, I think the planet Earth would be a better place without the insane child murder that takes place by nature every day. It kills zillions of organisms every day, and the majority of them, the vast majority, 99% of them, are immature organisms, children. Yes, it's a mass murder of children. Would be not better off without the man proposing such atrocities to us. No, not very literate either. When he really thinks that, question mark. Would we be not better off without the man proposing such atrocities on us? So the atrocity is, I claim you're unethical and that you've made the first impositional violation, and I'm going to defend the victims of your crimes, and that you're not allowed to do. Look in Mendham, look asshole, the channel is called DraftScience. It's about a physics theory. Again, the fact that you can't make these distinctions just proves what kind of lowlife you are. You can stay with us, but drop the toxic killing memes altogether. Why would I want to stay with you? You're manga-less, insensitive, glib assholes. Why would I want to hang out with you? We are not going to kill all life, never. Well, you're all going to get killed. Okay, you're going to die, asshole, and I hope you get what you deserve. That is, if you're such an advocate, I hope you get it the hard way, as hard as possible. Yeah, I hope you get what you deserve. I hope you get what you wish to impose. And you know, the fact is that life will be killed. The universe is going to kill it. It's going to eradicate every little fucking tiny bit of it. Every grain of sand in the Empire State Building is going to be spread throughout the universe, and you're never going to be able to see a single remnant of anything. There's not going to be a single shred of evidence of our existence ever having happened in this shithole. Rest assured, you're going to impose that on some generation. You're going to impose the long, maybe hard times of fighting against a universe out to kill you. You're going to have your entrails spread across space. You're going to make it bad. A lot worse than it has to be. Assholes like you. So rest assured that I am going to keep fighting against you. All right, so you're going to harass me on a physics channel because you don't like my ethics philosophy. I mean, it's just so overtly illogical. As long as you put out there these vicious ideas. So again, whatever. You've defined yourself as a petty, insane person. And I got nothing to say. Okay, you're a terrorist. That's all. You're a fucking censoring terrorist, trying to shut other people up. You don't want to defeat them in any kind of honest way. You just want to do it in all these dishonest ways. You piece of shit. Alright, you said you'd include links in the description, but I don't see any. Cool vid. Rain in the water. So, real Einstein. No doubt. So I might as well read this longer one by Imperialist. Logical. Nazi dictator. Anyway, good video. So why is it a good video, right? This is the joke. So the video has no content. It doesn't counter a single argument I've actually made. Doesn't deal with any of the facts as they're known. Just basically says, I'm Borg, you have to be Borg, or else I'm going to just gratuitously insult you. That's all. The most of it is incomprehensible, either due to the music or the filter on your camera. So he concedes most of the video is incomprehensible, yet he calls it a good video. Because somehow, at least the insults were in there. I guess Mosh Man, so again, more just crap, is going to respond, but he will not be able to say much. Because, as said, it is mostly in the shade what you say. And what he says is nothing. Again, he says basically, I don't care what causes the pattern. I don't care how it actually physically happens. That's all he said. Let's see. I take it you defend conventional modern physics. So this is a video. He said good video. As I do. Okay, so conventional means what? Light's a wave in the bent space ether like stuff. So he buys into time dimensions, bent space, Heisenberg, particles that don't know where they are, as Feynman would call them, particles, Copenhagen, many worlds, and string theory. A high school grad could tell Mosh Man why he is wrong. Well, why don't you find one of those? Because it'd be do better than you, maybe. Because you're clearly not claiming anything factual here. You're not presenting anything called an argument. With every claim he makes that defines modern physics. So, again, I've offered physicists money. They seem to be cowards. You all seem to be cowards. You don't make any straight up arguments in video form. So, as a group, how else can you be defined? You seem like fucking cowards. I've said I'll debate any of you in video exchanges, and I'll certainly I'll respond to any video made that's civil. Like this video is not technically civil. Like I said, all the crap typed at the end, the whole style of it is rubbish. It's not a proper physics video. I shouldn't have to respond to rubbish. But I will respond to anybody who makes a rational argument in video form. And I am willing to do it in person. Where are you people showing up with anything? Oh, that's right, you have nothing but insults. You're trolls. You're just fucking trolls. Gary is not a scientist, well, whatever. And he did not have college physics. Again, as if, again, I've pointed out how the college isn't teaching physics correctly in the sense that they malign the single slit experiment, don't describe its richness at all, and I've pointed out how there's mistakes in the physics lectures I've watched that are college lectures. So, but again, just discounts that. He allegedly watched a lot of physics videos on YouTube. Well, I've shown them in my video, so the allegedly thing seems kind of retarded when I'm actually showing the clips of the video by the different professors. But frankly, I think he really started 7 years ago. He would have told us in his video 7 years ago that he has started watching physics watching physics. It was part of the conversation 7 years ago, so I don't know how you missed that. But there was already arguments about what was seen in other physics videos online, and some of those were college videos, so I don't know how you missed that part. Lectures en masse. He didn't. So again, it's some implication that somehow the videos I've made have some sort of dishonesty streak where I didn't somehow point out every day. I watched 2 lectures today. I mean, when it's in the conversations all over the place for at least the last 4 years. I mean, it's just amazing. The first 3 years I was mainly constructing my theory, and I wasn't having to do the side-by-side comparison. I was just basically forming the structure of what's wrong with a particle theory and dealing with the problems it creates in terms of the evidence that doesn't fit, not just the evidence that does. And I think I dealt with a lot of those questions. He may have started them, but that would be only 2 to 3 years ago. I mean, this is psychotic weirdness. To make these distinctions. When did Gary start pointing out that he's watched physics lectures? I know I mentioned Suskind's name at least 5 years ago. Also, I doubt he did watch very many lectures. So yeah, so I know what's in the lectures. I know how to find what's in the lectures. Yet I didn't watch them. Okay. Maybe 1 or 2 lecture series. So again, I mean, I've watched the Professor Lewin ones, some of them multiple times. I mean, this is just a silly argument. And the Feynman ones I've seen, every one of those Feynman lectures I've probably seen at least 5 times. But the man knows surprisingly little about modern college physics. So another, just a statement. It doesn't say anything. No, you're the ones who seem clueless about how weak your evidence is, and you really don't want to acknowledge what is an obvious truth, that the evidence is incredibly weak for awful extraordinary claims. You claim the existence of a whole dimension, time dimension, and yet what do you have as real hard evidence for its existence? Just about nothing. He has a lot of half knowledge, whatever, things he may have heard, such as the existence of the photon, but he has sure as heck fire doesn't know what the photon is. Einstein went to his grave, okay, the guy responsible for much of your conventional physics that you agree with, went to his grave saying he hasn't advanced his knowledge of the photon 1 iota. So his basic perception was, I didn't gain anything from this life in terms of gaining knowledge of what a photon is. You're the people that seem pretty fucking clueless. You're clueless about how they're created. You're clueless about their function within atoms. You're clueless about their function in terms of creating the actual pressure between electrons. You're the ones who have no clue what a photon is. You're the ones who sit there and pretend that Feynman said it's a wave, when Feynman clearly said, no, it's a particle. I watch every Moshman video due to entertainment, though I'm not unable to comment on them because Gary blocked me in every instance I have on YouTube. Yes, well, as soon as your comments got preposterously rude, I have no obligation to accept your rudeness. None. He thinks it is just swell to block people and dissent. That's not even, you should make the argument, block people who dissent. Again, if you just dissented, that would be fine. If you made arguments presenting evidence, that would be fine. But you keep lying. Look at this whole comment is a lie. Gary didn't tell us he was watching physics lectures. Well, I didn't know I had to tell you. Sorry, I didn't know that was an obligation. So no, all these implications about some sort of, you're saying, Gary says he's seen these videos 5 times. You have some reason to doubt me. There's no evidence that is at all a doubtable claim made by me. It is far from an extraordinary claim when I can almost recite verbatim the professor's own rhetoric. Professor Lewin going, light plus light equals dark. I mean, I can quote them. Jesus Christ. Alright, then when he does not to hear it, or does not exist to him. Again, you're the ones who can't make a competent response video that shows any kind of decorum or respect or anything like that. All you can do is buffoon and insult. You have no argument here. You don't provide your evidence. Again, I've done the experiments on my porch. What's your counter arguments to what was discovered in those experiments? Inmendum is a douche for blocking and being rude to people. Well, again, I'm not accepting the argument. I don't go out on the internet and type crap on anybody's videos. And if you want to have a $10,000 bet about that, where I will request from Google, to pay Google to get my records, complete records on my entire existence on YouTube, and I'll prove to you that I've never gone on videos and talked this kind of shit. Because I'm not an asshole like you, fuckhead. First, even when the opposing party is rude as well, most men fires the first shot, so to speak. So he's saying I fire the first shot. I'm saying that doesn't ever happen, but fuck you. That's all I'm going to say to that. Fuck you. No, you're the idiot. Alright, and some idiot responds to the idiot with, not only the one and only quality I used to think he had was honesty, integrity, and now I see that even that's false in a few cases. So again, this constant, when was the last time you beat your wife bullshit accusations? You have no evidence that I have lied or that I have demonstrated some lack of integrity and played both ways. I've never had a sock account. I've never used a sock account. Every account I've ever had was pointed right to by my other accounts. I've never had any hidden agenda. It's just such a disgusting accusation to make, you fucking pedophile. Clearly that's what you're doing. You know I'm against pedophiles, and that's why you're so aggressive in this rhetoric. In most other cases, it's willful ignorance. Again, and you're demonstrating your intelligence by making a garbage argument. Slander. That's all you've got here. You have no evidence for your accusations, and you're presenting no counter argument defending any notion that I've even made a mistake somewhere. His channel relies on letting the points go over his head. Right, yes, I'm doing it right in front of everybody, letting the great point you made in this fucking comment. Where's your great point that went over my head? Oh, that's right, didn't happen. And then having him prance around as if he's some victor. Well, I have integrity, you don't. That's the difference. So yes, it's a minor victory not to be as big a gaping, stinking, shit-covered asshole as you. And so I'm not going to be terribly proud, but yes, I am grateful that I'm not as big a gaping, smelly, stinking asshole as you. I hope that he doesn't get close to anyone credible for any kind of talk. So again, he thinks I'm so easy to defeat and I'm completely wrong, and yet he doesn't want to see that happen. He doesn't want to see me trounced, okay, by the smart people that can defend this thing with something like a real argument instead of this rubbish. So, you know, again, who sounds like the coward? Ah, that's right. They sound like the coward. They're the ones afraid. Alright. So, I think the job has been done. I just did notice that Dissident Science guy, he has, if this is a new video, it says new. No charge model for ionic bonds, electricity, or electronics. I mean, it's just so fucking stupid. You know, and I just, there's such a duplicity in this thing. Like, oh, let's all be a collective of dissident science, as long as you agree with me. Because I'm going to insult the fuck out of any of your thinking with just rubbish arguments. Again, the idea of some idiot, sorry, you have to be an idiot, not to acknowledge the existence of charge as a real thing that happens in the real universe. You know, the fact that there's a huge difference between this plus thing and the minus thing, and that it's an inverted difference. The two things are opposite reflections of each other, inverse reflections of each other. What affects one affects the other exactly the opposite way. It's a real phenomenon, asshole. You can't just pretend, oh, it's not a real thing. It's a real thing. Now, it's not a magic thing. It's made of a real physical phenomenon. But it's a phenomenon that requires you to acknowledge the existence of something called polarization. Two different kinds of things. You can't make it out of one thing. Alright. So, that video probably later. We'll see. His arguments usually are sort of empty, so it might not be worth the trouble, but we'll see if he makes any actual arguments. Alright, so enough done, enough said. People are insanely rude and psychotically so. So I have to fix this camera. I'm sick of having to fix things. Maybe I can just get the wire to go under here. Maybe the camera will stay. I don't know. It's just irritating things after doing fucking bullshit that shouldn't have to be part of any of this crap. Little tiny technical issue really shouldn't create any marginalization of the entire production. Alright, anyway, so that's enough, I think. Yeah, that's enough. So, until next time, and